Welcome back to Progressive Republic. I'm your host, Landon Mitchell. Progressive Republic is dedicated to discussing leftist perspectives online. We're here today with a great friend of the podcast and a very distinguished guest, Dr. Richard Carrier. Dr. Richard Carrier has been on the podcast a few times to discuss topics like nationalism and previously the Trump administration. In light of the upcoming midterm election, in November, I thought I'd have Dr. Richard Carrier, who's been trained as a historian, come on and talk about the second Trump administration. So, Dr. Richard Carrier, I was wondering to start off with, did you happen to watch the State of the Union address, or did you skip it?
To be fair, I don't watch State of the Union addresses generally, but I especially avoided this one because I stopped listening to everything Donald Trump says about 6 months ago because it's all useless. I mean, it's just constant lies and disinformation. So I always have to go somewhere else for my information, usually other countries' newspapers, for example, uh, and other sources of expert analysis. So no, I didn't watch it. I saw some like reviews, comments about it and stuff like that. It sounded pretty useless to me.
Well, I caught some of it because I catch a decent amount of Trump related stuff because I used to live with my grandparents and they would always watch Fox.
Oh
So
wow,
I'm up to date. I'm up to
poor
date
fellow.
on yeah. I subject myself to a lot of torture. Um, but it's interesting to see them bring out these veterans and to think of the long history Trump has of mistreating veterans. I mean, he said terrible things about them around General Milley, I believe it was, and he promised to donate this money way back in the day to Veterans Affairs that he never donated.
Oh,
So he generally, I don't know if you remember that story.
I do not remember that. No.
Yeah, so he's generally, it's generally interesting to just see him bring up all these veterans, and he's actually done very little for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, even I mean, it's you're talking about using them as props for his political propaganda, which is exactly like people will cite, for example, oh, he gave them money, except it was money they were already going to get. So he just claimed that he was giving them extra special money, but he didn't. He didn't do anything extra special for them at all. And I remember I just marched. God, was it? I don't remember when it was now. When sometime, yeah, like March, I think, of last year, when we had the Veterans March on Washington because of the way he was abusing all of the veteran systems, all of the veteran benefits and things like that, and in particular the VA hospital system and so on. People just forget, right, that that's what he was doing. He's not a friend of veterans at all.
Right. And I actually remember he's banned from starting any kind of charities in the state of New York,
That's right. Yeah.
because he,
Fraud, felony fraud.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he started a charity and bought a portrait of himself for $1 million. So that was his great charitable contribution. So they
Yeah.
figured it out, and he's banned from starting charities. So he wouldn't even be able to start a charity to help veterans in the state of New York as things are right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Yeah, and it's just so many things that have added up throughout his life and throughout his time in politics. It's really hard, honestly, to keep track of. And you were saying you go to foreign newspapers and things like that. It's kind of ironic because I like to go for PBS News, but they just got rid of PBS News Weekend because of all the budget cuts and the
That's
Senate's
right. Yeah.
rescission bill.
Yes, the oligarchs are buying all the media, and if they can't buy it, they kill it. That's and it's hard. It's increasingly hard to get. Certainly, very hard to get well funded real media that actually has journalistic standards and actually is doing the things that journalism should do. But yeah, other countries are doing it. Like the U.S. is kind of wrecked as far as media and landscape goes. But there's a lot of experts going to YouTube and things like that. But it's kind of the Wild West, so it's a bit difficult for a critical thinker to know who's giving you reliable information and who's not, because there's no institutional reputation backing a lot of these. But I do rely on that a lot when I can actually triangulate different expert sources to confirm who's telling me the truth and who's not. And so I just have to do that. My media diet is just constant critical fact checking of everything. And so I find, some sources are a little more reliable than others, but not totally. And so I just have to cobble information together that way, because there's really no truth economy at the top of the American media landscape.
So we talked about flooding the zone with bullshit, as Steve Bannon puts it.
Yeah.
And Steve Bannon, if I remember correctly, he goes all the way back to the Breitbart days, and they were putting out crazy conservative clickbait stuff about Barack Obama, saying he's a secret Muslim, secret communist, was born in Kenya. Sarah Palin said he palled around with terrorists, all kinds of deranged stuff about Obama.
Right.
And is that kind of where the one of the major points for this constant output of just nonsense and disinformation came from? Is that where Bannon learned to perfect his?
I was talking to someone else recently about this, and it is, you know the label that you'll see people talking about the 21st century as the post-truth era, right? Like there's a whole trend in our culture to no longer actually care about the truth, and this is like a widespread thing, not just the elite doing it, but voters just no longer care what is true. They just believe whatever in-group that makes them feel emotionally better or whatever. So that people play to their biases and how they feel, and people decide what's true based on how they feel, and not on actual fact checking or reputation checking or anything like that. And that's just become to the point where you have people like Trump will just assert things, right? They'll just say things that are wildly false and they'll never allow you to correct them. Like if you correct them, they'll just keep saying the false thing over and over again, call the correction fake news, and so you just get this sort of endless truth distortion field. But it's become commonplace, like everybody's doing it now, because it works so well. Because people, I must say, at least American citizens are so phenomenally stupid that they actually fall for this all the time. And of course, obviously, hashtag not all Americans, but enough of them to actually create a crisis in our country.
Right. And there's actually an interesting study. I forgot who conducted it, but I read about it in an econ book. And basically, what it shows is if you tell people that the majority of economists support a policy proposal, the support for that policy among the public will actually go down. So even when you can get people to listen to experts, they may actually be less willing to do what the experts suggest when they learn that's the expert suggestion.
Yeah.
The other thing that speaks to kind of how ignorant our discourse is now is, there's studies that even show that using people's personal appearance as a weapon is actually extremely effective politically, and we've seen Trump use that for years, right? He would always make fun of people's appearances, and there's studies that show it actually works really effectively. And we've kind of talked about this in our first Trump administration discussion. There's a kind of evolutionary default where people just want to be told what's true. They just want someone they can trust. They don't want to do the thinking. They don't want to spend the time and energy to think for themselves. And these things kind of all tie together, right?
Yeah, but it's what leads to the cascade failure is that even when someone who's made that really stupid decision to just pick someone to always believe, they're like that method wouldn't be as bad if they actually did anything to track the reliability of their authorities, right? So like you could very quickly, like if you cared about the truth, you could very quickly figure out that Fox News is completely unreliable, right? There's nothing they say is reliable. You go check like the facts outside of that, you find out they're completely distorting everything. So you should just, if you're going to pick someone to just believe, you should have figured out by now that they're not the ones you should pick, right? And so and so the fact that no one cares about reputational reliability, they just literally, it's feelings and emotion and in-group choice. That's what's leading to the post-truth era. That's what allows things like Fox News to thrive and manipulate people the way they do. And we saw this start to rise in the later 20th century. People could research this, the way that specific programs were developed in the tobacco industry and then in the oil industry, and that it's happened in other industries, specifically to try and manipulate public opinion by flooding the zone with disinformation for the purpose of getting people to distrust experts so that they could prevent expert knowledge from filtering down to the people, right? So then once you just decouple people from reliability of expert facts, science, and things like that, once you decouple people from that, then you can sell them any bullshit you want just by you pulling the emotional levers and so on. And they actually, this was like a conscious plan. Like, they did this on purpose. And we have, through court cases, we have tons of documentation of this showing that they did it. And this is a trend that was picked up more and more towards the end of the 20th century, and it just became standard, for example, in the Republican Party and other industry groups. Is just what they do now. It's just the ordinary thing. It's so common that we saw this spill out. I mean, this seems disconnected, but it connects. The Blake Lively lawsuit, right? So that you have the Baldoni Lively thing. And what happened in result of that is what spilled out because of this feud is that there are agencies, just normal, respectable PR agencies, that just as a matter of what they do is sell you disinformation packages. So you could say, I need this person's reputation to be destroyed. I need you to spread bullshit into the media so everybody sees these dark stories about them or whatever, all the fake stuff. And so everybody believes it. Can you do that for me? Can you just, and yeah, we're fucking, that's what we do. We've got packages ready. This is our jam. You just pay for it. And then you can just buy now, just go to any PR agency for anybody, for any product, any politician, any political party, any political purpose, whatever it is, and just buy a disinformation package, and they will just commodify it and run the campaign, which is to create like all of this fake news that filters up through real news, and then people start believing it. And then, of course, in the result, people no longer trust certain news sources because there's so much disinformation, so many conflicting facts and claims and so on, so that it creates this disconnect from truth that then leaves people floating free to be manipulated with emotions. And then it just becomes an emotion game. You mentioned like appealing to appearance, right? Like try to say that somehow someone's appearance matters. It doesn't, right? It has nothing to do with whether they're a good politician or a good leader or whatever. I think that's a small piece of it, but it is a symptom. It shows an example of how people have been so decoupled from truth as a reliable metric that now they're just following their emotions, and appealing to like their prejudices about appearances is an example of how to appeal to emotions. And that's just the world we live in now. And people are used to this, like, you're on the internet, you can't believe half the things on the internet. Just the fact that you know that everybody knows this, you can't believe things on the internet, it is the symptom itself that defines the post-truth era, to where, because it takes work to actually figure out where the true information is, the reliable information is, like you mentioned, no one's doing it. And I shouldn't say no one. Obviously, there's a percentage, let's say like 30-40% of the population does do this successfully, but that's not enough, right? Like, if you've got 60% of the population, honestly, even 10%, because you have the 10% swing voters in the middle that are deciding all elections now, those are the only people you have to, like, deconvince that the truth matters and get them to just vote based on their feelings, because they don't trust any information anymore. And they don't trust any information anymore because disinformation packaging has deliberately created an atmosphere where they don't trust information anymore on purpose. They did that on purpose. And for people to, and this is all documented, it's easily found, you can easily fact check it and confirm that this is a real thing that's happening. No one knows, and no one cares, right? So like that's why we're in the post-truth era, where truth no longer matters. It's irrelevant, really. And people will give lip service to truth but with a smirk, right? And with like conspiracy theories to back up whatever other thing their emotions tell them, what their feels tell them they should believe instead of the truth. And so that's where we're at, and it's become a pervasive problem in society that is, collapsing the United States. Like our country's being driven into the ground politically, economically, every possible metric is shit in our country right now. We literally live in a shithole country because of this, and people just won't steer the ship away from the iceberg because of this stupidity, and that it's hard to watch, right? To be in this
Mhm.
country to see that happen. um, so I do try to keep my sanity by watching what's going on in other countries, and this plague has affected other countries, but nowhere near like we're the canary in the coal mine. Like it's destroying our country faster than any other right now.
Right. And right wing media is particularly good at this, right? I mean, there's no equivalence.
Oh yeah, they practically invented the playbook for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to like Roger Ailes, right? Like Roger Ailes developed a lot of this stuff back in the 70s and then
Yeah,
took it over to Fox News and used it. I mean, honestly, a lot of this stuff is the fruition of like a 50-year game plan
yeah.
to
Oh, you're
instill like a
absolutely right.
certain like media environment in the United
One
States
hundred
of
percent.
America.
Yeah, and
Um,
anybody can research this and find out like that. You and I, they hear us talking. Oh, you're just talking shit. We are not talking shit. Like you go research it. Do your own research. I've got an article on my website. You go to richardcarrier.info. Look for do your own research. I've got a guide for you how to really do your own research, not the fake do your own research everybody else does. Do your own research. You can actually find out exactly what our host said just now, and that this is a real thing. It's actually a plan. It's a deliberate mechanism to manipulate Americans, particularly Americans. It's been exported to other countries, but it's been most successful in the United States. No, that's just the reality that we're in, and it's shocking to see that no one, like so many people, are oblivious to this and don't believe it or don't understand it and aren't taking any steps to protect themselves from this manipulation. And it's because they're so comfortable with their emotional attachment to the bullshit that they're sold. The movie Wake Up Dead Man had a great scene in there where the guy's talking to the politician is talking to the priest, and he says I just can't connect with voters, and the priest says something about like, oh yeah, it's very hard to like get authenticity and connect with the public and stuff. It's like maybe you should like start from first principles, and he comes back with, oh, you mean show them something they hate and make them believe that it will destroy something they love?
yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, that's not what I meant. But obviously the writers get it, right? That's exactly it. That's the strategy, and it requires first pulling the cart away from the horse. You have to decouple the whole truth engine away from the horse, which is the belief engine. Once you've gotten that decoupled, now they're prey. They're easy prey for emotion. That emotional manipulation, and that's what's happening. And it's just everybody's like dragging the ship down. We're
Hmm.
sinking and drowning because of them, and there's nothing I can do about it. Right? I do my best with with my publication and trying to convince people to start behaving rationally through my blog and things like that. But
So
you
to
know,
tie this all together to the second Trump administration, the people who fall for these kind of disinformation packages, they must have very short memories because apparently nobody who joined Trump's coalition in 2024 remembers any of the terrible things that he did in 2020, right? And they've been
yeah,
they've been conned into this notion that he's going to do something for affordability, and we're far enough into this now, it's pretty clear that he's not. Um, and there's so much disinformation to keep up with. He's literally going out and telling people last Christmas that you should save your money during Christmas and spend more cautiously because prices are going to go up. So it's pretty clear how much the affordability agenda has failed for so many reasons we could talk about. But it's pretty clear
yeah.
these people who have short memories bought into the affordability con from Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's worse than that, of course, right? So like because people are no longer connected to the truth train, they're no longer fact checking anything. they no longer trust any sources of information except their gut feeling, which means just their emotions. They actually just hear what they want to hear and don't hear what the other thing. So like Trump can make contradictory promises, but the public will only hear the promise that they want, and they forget that he ever made the contradictory promise. And then they won't check to ask, they won't even ask, like, well, okay, yeah, sure, anybody can walk up to me and promise I'm going to get the affordability, I'm going to get prices down, right? Anybody can claim that. So like if you're even like half rational, you should know, like, well, how is he, like, does he actually have a plan that would actually work? And so you would check, and then you, of course, if you checked, you'd find out that no, he does not. He had no plan at all. He just made blind promises often that were blatantly illogical.
Was the tariffs, right?
Yeah, but even that's not, like, that plan doesn't work. So for instance, to give you an example of what I mean, like, he got people genuinely believing, and I think you could find polls and things like this where people actually thought, because he said that he was going to bring prices down, not inflation down, prices down, right? Which would mean deflation, right? And there were tons of people online and different reliable news media and so forth talking about that doesn't make any sense. Like you first of all, that's almost impossible to do. No one's done that. It would be bad because it would have economic consequences. So what are you going to do to hedge against those economic consequences?
He have to fire people.
Yeah, but he had no plan, is the point, right? But people just believed him. That was one that was easily debunkable, where you could easily find out that that's a fucking lie. Like, why would you believe someone promising you that when you know it's impossible and he has no plan to accomplish it? So yeah, and yeah, the tariffs were a thing where he actually sold. This is another example. He sold the tariffs on 3 completely contradictory reasons that literally undermine each other, so that, like, he has no coherent tariff policy. But what people would do is they would choose to hear the one of the 3 that they liked and forget that he said the other 2, and not ask themselves, wait a minute, these are contradictory policies. He's full of shit then, right? Like, why should I believe him? But no, instead of doing that, they just blank out on the other plans and hear the one plan they want. And of course, different people want the different plans, so people focus on the one that it is. But his tariff policy doesn't really meet those demands because it contradicts each other. So, for example, he made 3 different claims for what the tariffs were. Like, at one moment, he'll claim that he's going to replace income taxes with tariffs, which is physically impossible. Like, the most you could ever get of our budget through tariffing is 10% at most. Realistically, you rarely beat 5%. So it's not even, that was an easily provably false claim. So that plan was obviously bullshit. It was bullshit the moment he said it, and anyone with half a brain should have been able to figure that out in 5 minutes, right? So that was the first plan. It's like, we're going to just replace income taxes with tariffs. Okay, that's a stupid plan, but whatever. But then he says, I need the tariffs to bully other allies into getting deals, quote unquote, deals, and then I'll take the tariffs away, right? So the tariffs were just a cudgel to sort of intimidate people into making deals, which means that entire plan is based on the idea that the tariffs aren't going to stick around, that you're only going to use them for a few months or a year or whatever, and get rid of them as soon as you get your deal. Well, that contradicts that we're going to replace income, we're going to replace all of our income, all of our budget with tariffs, right? You can't do both those policies at the same time. It's completely contradictory. So it doesn't make any sense. But people get, like, angry for emotional reasons at other people cheating us. We're not entirely sure how they're cheating us, but Trump said they're cheating us. And so he has to use the tariffs to get deals or whatever those are. And the deals were all fake. This is another thing. Like, it didn't really result in anything. It's all just a lie, right? Just constant lies, and I get sick of it. But the third thing that he claimed was onshoring, right? He said he wanted to do tariffs to onshore industries, but this contradicts both of the other goals, so you can't use tariff policy to do that and the other 2 things, right? So, and the tariff policy he chose was more geared toward looking like it's doing one of the other 2 things, and therefore could never have done the thing that this thing, onshoring, which is getting what he said, get manufacturing back in the United States. But anybody who, like, again, if you have half a brain, you could just go and check and see that we don't even have human beings enough to onshore all of the industries that he wants to onshore. So we can't do it. We don't even have the personnel. Of course, it's contradictory because he's kicking all the laborers out of the country. But that's a whole other story. So we don't even have the personnel to replace. So you have to, if you're going to do an onshoring plan with tariffs, you have to pick an industry. You can't do the entire freaking economy. You have to pick an industry like steelwork or something, or auto manufacture or something. Now, of course, we know from history that these always fail. These programs always are stupid and make everything worse. But even at just the basic like internal logic requires that you pick some industries, not the entire economy, right? You can't tariff freaking everything and get onshoring, especially because to build the factories to onshore the jobs, you have to buy stuff that now you're taxing with tariffs, right? So it's actually more expensive now to build the factories to onshore. So no one wants to onshore. No one's onshoring because it's too expensive because of the freaking tariffs, right? So it's this just kind of like childish, toddlerish, smashing the sandcastle behavior that he just goes like Mussolini, up chin up, I'm so awesome, look at what I'm doing. And no one figures out that this is complete wrecking ball to the U.S. economy and cannot accomplish any of the three goals. He would have to have picked one goal anyway, but he didn't do that. And he's not accomplishing any of the goals. And of course, those goals aren't accomplishable anyway. That gets into the next level of where you really have to know things, like you have to actually learn how economics works, which everyone really morally responsibly should learn how economics works. If you're going to vote for economic policy, you better frickin' know how economic policy works, at least at the basic level. Enough to know that his tariff plan could not have accomplished any of these three goals, much less all three goals. But anyway, that people just emotionally attach themselves to the claim that they like, and then they just believe it. They don't check if it's true. They don't check if it's even plausible. They don't check if it's contradictory to something else he's doing. Like, the interest in the truth is completely evaporated. No one cares what's true. They just want to believe things based on their emotions and their feelings. And so that's why we're in the post-truth era, and that's why we have someone like Trump. Like, I'd say, like, in the 80s, Trump could never have won an election with the behavior that he's engaging in now. We needed the destroyed confidence in information environment. We needed the sort of collapsed internet environment for someone like Trump to win. Like, I don't think people would have been easy. People were dupable, but we're not this dupable in the 80s. So anyway, that's some soapbox rant on that. But that's just one example. If you start with the tariffs, you could pick any other policy he has, and it's the same kind of play out. People just aren't interested in what's actually happening, what the results actually are, how anything actually works. They don't care whether he's telling the truth. They have no interest in even finding out if he's telling the truth. And that's why we are where we are.
Well, I think with regard to tariff policy, we are hitting some kind of political bedrock, some kind of place where the laws of politics actually work again, and people are actually realizing what's going on. Because let's just face it, manufacturing jobs haven't come back, right?
Right.
And they're actually, I think, lower than they were under Biden or something like
correct.
that.
Correct. We're losing.
Yeah. We're losing manufacturing jobs. And obviously that ties into what you were talking about, which is that the inputs are just too expensive. If you raise tariffs on steel, then you're going to raise the cost of all the things that require steel to be built. And it's pretty simple economic logic. It's Econ 101.
Yeah, especially since like there's this, somehow people have this dream in their head that, well, if we tariff steel like crazy, suddenly steel will start growing out of trees in America, and suddenly we'll have all the steel we need, right? Like as if somehow that's going to like grow mines, like steel mines are just going to, like a wizard is going to cast a spell, and steel mines will suddenly explode with tons more steel. And so who needs foreign steel? We've got all the steel we need. Like that, it doesn't even make any like basic sense, like board game player sense. It makes, like, if you're capable of playing Monopoly, you should be able to figure this out, that this doesn't make any sense. Tariffing steel makes no sense. Like, it makes no sense at all. The steel industry would say it makes sense because, well, we're trying to protect our jobs or whatever. But that's the problem, is like, if you can't make steel efficiently, well, and of course, you have iron mines is where you get steel, carbon, and so on. But the thing is like, if you can't make steel as efficiently as everybody else plus import costs, right? If that steel is still cheaper, well, we've lost. Like, that's the free market. We just didn't innovate. We don't have the ability to compete. So we really should just give up on our steel industry and buy everybody else's steel. And this is, what is it when you call, when
You
you
think of
get,
comparative advantage?
that's it, law of comparative
Yeah.
advantage. Thank you.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it's the law of comparative advantage. If other people are making steel cheaper than us, we benefit from buying their steel and not investing in too much in our own steel. We need to keep the industry alive enough for national security reasons. But there's no sense in making our steel twice as expensive by only buying our own steel, right? So it's just not logical. Now, if you really want us to be competitive, then the solution is not tariffs. The solution is kicking the ass of the steel industry and saying, why aren't you competitive? What do you need from us to get competitive? Do you need R&D? Like, what do you need to make this, to allow you to like sell us cheaper steel than everybody else is making? So you have to make one of these decisions, right? Like there's several rational options to take, and Trump is taking none of them. And I think for people to understand that, they really do need to know some basic things about, like, what is the law of comparative advantage? Why is that law established? And how does it affect these kinds of decisions? You know, that's why I think you got to pick an industry. If you pick, is it the auto industry? What is the industry you want to pick? And if you're going to give up on an industry, which, you know, Trump has done horrible things for the auto, and you do have to come up with, well, what else are we going to do? Like, what is our comparative advantage? If it's not making steel or cars, it's got to be something, right? Well, so let's move the jobs, let's move the training, let's adjust, let's pivot, right? Let's pivot to the market where it is, where we can maintain our competitive advantage. So anyway, these are the kinds of like rational policy decisions, which is, it's funny that right now Canada is run by an actual economist, and is like
Mhm.
kicking our fucking ass for that reason. Canada is doing really well and is not being crushed by Trump's economic war against Canada. They're handling it very well, and we're not. And that's just the difference between hiring an expert to do your books and hiring an idiot to do your books. And it's like one of the most basic decisions that voters have. There's a moral responsibility to choose the expert and not the idiot. And that's just, we just live in a world where that's just not the case anymore.
Right, definitely. And so, on the subject of tariffs and comparative advantage, I think one of the things that was pretty crucially exposed during the United States' intervention in Ukraine is that the United States' industrial capacity is severely diminished, and there is something to be said for that.
Yeah.
And there are progressive capitalists like Ro Khanna who were writing books about this a while ago. Um, we could reinvest in our industrial capacity, and that's what things like the Biden era Chips Act was supposed to do. And it's kind
Yeah,
of like you
absolutely.
said. Trump's doing everything that's not rational to do. He's against the Chips Act, right? And he's against all this
It's just so
investment.
stupid.
He's
I mean,
against all
to
this
be
investment that's
clear,
going to bring the cost of steel down.
yeah, to be clear, he's against the Chips Act, like on Tuesday, but in favor of onshoring chips manufacturing on Wednesday, and then back to being against the Chips Act on Thursday. Like, he has no coherent policy, right? He's against he's against everything and for everything, and then just makes decisions based on a whim. And no one like thinks that this is a bad idea. Like, no one thinks that maybe we shouldn't have hired this guy, right? That's the kind of thing that really pisses me off. But when you get to when you get artillery shells, so that was one of the big things. So one thing that Ukraine showed, even despite everything they've shown us about the importance of pivoting to drone warfare, like they're basically fighting World War III in miniature for us. So we're getting a rare glimpse into what the next war is going to look like. Usually, every time we go to war, we're fighting the last war, and so we're not fighting the current war because everything's changed. But now we're seeing what the next war is going to look like. We could be prepping for that, right? So we're getting this sort of crystal ball that we normally don't get. But even despite that, one thing that we're seeing in Ukraine is how crucial artillery is. It's more crucial than we ever thought in terms of our usual math for war planning and things like that. And both Russia and Ukraine are burning through artillery. Like they're burning barrels. Like they can't even manufacture barrels fast enough to replace them after they burn them out, and they're running out of shells. Right, with all the people, all the world trying to get together to give them weapons or to give them shells, they're running out, right? So it's hard to keep up. And then that's when we realized, and people who wanted to check this, you can check this. It's a lot of articles about how our own military industrial complex had a sort of, a wake up call about this. Is like, if we can't even supply Ukraine, we can't supply ourselves. And I don't mean like we should stop supplying Ukraine because we need the artillery for ourselves. No, it's worse than that. It's that we don't have enough capacity to win any war right now. So this is like a realization of oh shit, if we go to war with anyone, China, Russia, if any kind of land war of any kind, we do not have the capacity to compete with artillery shell production. And Ukraine has taught us this. And so, well, that's kind of a problem, right? But is Trump doing anything about it? Like, does he care? No, like he's oblivious to this, which is a real problem that we really should be working on to solve. But he's not paying attention to it at all. Like, he doesn't care, and that's another should be a firing offense. Is that if someone is fucking up your factory, well, get them out of there. They shouldn't be managing the factory anymore. You should have the sense to hire someone who knows that if you're running out of bolts, and you burn through a certain number of bolts every year, and you're going to run out of bolts, and you're going to collapse the profitability of a factory. Well, you better solve your bolt problem. Like, that's got to be one of your main missions. So there's a lot of things like that. I picked that as like just one example out of literally hundreds where there are things that really do need to be done that Trump is literally not even doing anything about. He's not talking about it. He's not interested in it. He doesn't even know that it's a problem that he needs to solve. He's so busy chasing his performative bullshit, like even the immigration policy, which is basically performative. It's just stuff to be extra violent to show up on the news so that he can claim that he's doing something, but he's actually he's not expelling. Like, the idea is to expel all the immigrants. He wants to get rid of all the immigrants. But his rate of expulsions are down. His method is so bad that he's actually failing relative to Biden. Like, Biden got rid of more immigrants than Trump is. Trump's massively reckless military, criminal syndicate plan is garbage, even for its own nefarious purpose. It can't even do the evil thing. It's like a James Bond villain who ends up killing himself, and Bond doesn't even have to do anything. It's just astonishing, and how people don't notice this and realize this is bad. We really shouldn't have voted for this guy. We got to get this guy out. That's the thing that upsets me, and I don't know what to do about.
Well, he's been proposing a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, where Ukraine cedes territory to Russia that Russia hasn't even conquered yet.
Yeah.
So there's an inspiring start to those negotiations.
Yeah, no, his idea of peace is to just admit Russia won. Just give them what they want. That's the only. You don't hold any cards, and of course, Ukraine's been holding all the cards. They've been kicking Russia's ass. I mean, the meat grinder of Ukraine has killed something like 1 million Russians so far, and honestly, we should be thanking them for grinding down the military capabilities of Russia and exposing all of the inabilities of Russia. We don't even have to put boots on the ground. All we got to do is pay for the shit, and we get our free, easy war to shut down an enemy. Of course, I don't think Trump perceives Putin and Russia as an enemy. I think he sees them as an ally, because of his sort of Mussolini strongman attitude. He actually envies Putin. He doesn't see them as an existential threat that we should be doing something about. And that's why he would say, oh, just let Putin have what he wants. That's the peace plan.
Yeah, and one of the things that really came to be exposed is that I have to worry about is that the United States of America kind of excluded Russia from a lot of important decisions, especially when it came to handling Saddam Hussein. And obviously, this invasion can't be justified whatsoever. But I kind of wonder if the United States of America has made certain mistakes in handling Russia in the past.
Yeah, probably. The problem with take Iraq, for example, or Syria, is that those were Vietnams in the sense that Vietnam was a proxy war with Russia, and kind of everything that went wrong with it, and why we got our asses kicked, is because of that. We were treating it as a proxy war, and we weren't conducting it like a real war, essentially. And we did the same thing again in Iraq, and we did the same thing again in Syria, where those are actually proxies of Russia. Basically, at the time, Iraq and Syria were Russian assets, so they were completely built up on Russian military equipment, Russian
Right.
military interests. So invading Iraq was invading Russia, just like if we invaded Afghanistan when Afghanistan was a Russian territory. It wasn't when we went in, because that was Russia's proxy war, where we bought the Taliban and paid the Taliban and supplied them to kick the Russians' ass, and so Russia got completely wiped in Afghanistan and pulled out. And so now, when we went into Iraq and Syria, and just like in Vietnam, we were doing the same thing, but from the other side. They were funding the enemy, grinding us down, and laughing the whole way through. So, that when you're talking about things like the Iraq war or the Syria problem, we needed completely different policies for dealing with those. Not because we needed to play nice with Russia, but because the realities were more complicated than we could solve with the kind of boots on the ground, nation building, which never works really. I see that, like, with Venezuela, for example. Trump has no boots on the ground. He's just cuts the head off the snake and then says, "You guys figure it out," and has no plan for regime change at all, despite lying about it. Right? He says, "Oh, we're gonna decide who runs Venezuela. We're gonna go in and take it over and all that." None of that happened. Right? So it was just do a military raid and get out and forget about them. Who cares about Venezuela? And it's kind of the same thing now with Iran. Right? Is like they have no plan for regime change. They're just going to blow up, the leadership of Iran.
Mhm.
Hurrah! I can't say that's a bad thing, but they have no plan for what to do. Like, so who's going to take over? Is it, well, I'll just let the rebels take over? I think it's going to be the Islamo-fascist Republican Guard that's going to take over. You're going to get a military strongman. You're going to make things worse if you don't have a plan. You got to have a fucking plan. And that's the thing, is they didn't have a plan. And even in Iraq, when we went in, this is a different president, different war. When we went in, we had a plan, but we ditched it. And we go back to the first Iraq War, for example, which is the war that I was in service in during, and that we had a plan for replacing Saddam, but we had limited goals, and we achieved our goals, and we pulled out, and we left all the rebels that we told to take over. We left them hanging, literally, like they basically just got killed and so forth. We abandoned them, right? So we told them, take over your country, run it. Like, here's your opportunity. We have your back, and then we didn't have their back, and so the entire rebellion got completely wiped out because we backed away and didn't do anything to help them. And so I fear the same thing. This is just a repeat in Iran, where the rebels are just going to get wiped out because Trump isn't doing anything to actually have their back. It's just a foolish, let's just bomb the hell out of them policy. Even if you think that some of the objectives are worthy, even if you think that, you have to see this as still a war crime because he's not getting congressional approval, which is a violation of the Constitution, which is why we do the No Kings rallies, because that's the behavior of a king who doesn't need Congress's permission to do things like this. No, he just does what he wants, and nobody does anything. There's no consequences. He'll never get impeached for a war crime because this is a war crime. It's right out of the Constitution on that. No, it won't happen. No one's going to do anything. And so, but it's just a repeat of the same situation over and over again. And that's kind of the sign of the decline of the American empire, essentially.
Yeah, and I don't know much about Iranian politics, but I do know that when the U.S. strikes Iran, it has a history of fostering support for the regime. So, given that, I think there's probably something to your Islamic Revolutionary Guard prediction. But going back to uh, Trump's second term, I wanted to talk a little bit more about domestic affairs. I want to talk about
Yeah.
DOGE a little bit because DOGE, I think, is a big part of all the lying and grifting that took place,
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
basically said, we're going to cut all this money and make the government so much more efficient. And they were giving all these huge numbers, hundreds of billions of dollars. And then they passed this rescission bill where they cut $6 billion. And most of it's like from public broadcasting and higher education and science.
Yeah, and pointless, right? It's like a fraction of the actual budget of the United States, so it's a meaningless act, right? It's just political, just destroying things they don't like. They don't save us enough money to matter. It's just a way, just a stupid thing to do. All the lying you pointed out is just constant lies. Like everything Doge claimed was a lie. They committed a ton of crimes, like actual prosecutable crimes. But of course, the prosecutors are in the pocket of Trump, so no one's going to prosecute those crimes. And right. And they actually made things worse. So like all the budget cutting they did actually cost us more money in the long run. So they actually were net negative on Doge. And it did none of the actual things that improve efficiency. This is a thing, I've been talking about this for 20 years. There was a lot of really good literature around the turn of the century about government efficiency programs. And a lot of that was because of Al Gore's government reinvention project when he was under Clinton. There's a reason why the Democratic Clinton administration is the only administration in our lifetimes that ever produced a surplus, a budget surplus, and we're actually paying down the debt. So no deficit, the opposite. We were ending up with extra money, and we're using that to pay down our debts, the national debt. And we've not done that ever. I mean, we've been running massive, outrageous deficits. As soon as Bush got in, crazy deficits, and it's just been the same. Obama tried to like pare down the deficits, like he couldn't get them to zero, but he did reduce them. But once he was out, we got the next folks in, and then
Biden actually made some payments to the deficit because Joe Manchin negotiated that during Build Back Better. He said some hundreds of billions of dollars of all the tax revenue had to go to paying down the deficit. So there's some paying down the deficit under Biden.
Right? Yeah. I mean, people can check these things and look into them. But another thing is like when we get to Trump, especially now. If there's a lot of chatter now, you can go check. You see some media outlets are catching on to this. They're pointing out that he's running dangerous deficits. So you're talking about Doge is supposed to save us all this money, but he's actually worse. He's actually spending more money, not less, more money than that. So all that cutting didn't do anything. It did nothing. It had no effect whatsoever on this.
He just proposed a $1.2 trillion defense budget.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing.
Isn't there stuff in the literature about a country spending a certain percentage of its money on defense? Like, because I fear at a certain point you're kind of like North Korea, when you're spending so much money on defense that you're not spending it on civilian infrastructure and your country starts to suffer.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's actual science on that. But the funny thing is that he was like complaining about other countries not ponying enough to pay for the military, policing of the world, right? Like NATO, you're not spending enough money. We're covering all of it. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be covering your fair share. Like that was a whole big thing that he went on about. And what does he turn around? Is he's spending more money? Like the whole idea was to spend less, right? It's like he actually got some NATO countries to start ponying up more money. More money like is coming out of Europe and Scandinavia in support of Ukraine than before, like by huge amounts. So
they just agreed to a $90 billion funding package.
Yeah. So it's just irrational behavior. It's like we want other countries to foot more of the bill for military policing of the world. And this is all the isolationists who voted for him are like, yeah, we're going to spend less money on military abroad because other folks, that's their problem, not ours. And no, what does he do? He's going to increase our military bill and spend more. It's completely contradictory behavior. It makes no sense. And then
there's also him bailing out Argentina. Right?
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, that's a pivot, but you're right. You can bring that up. That's another. Now that talks about farm policy, agro policy. How that was a big shit dump on the face of American farmers. That was just precious. It's quite shocking actually that happened, and then farmers are still butthurt about that, about how screwed it was. First of all, they lost all their like soybean trade with China, and Trump turns around and bails out, like gives billions of dollars of assurances. It wasn't necessarily money. Risk. He took on billions of dollars of risk to prop up a country that became the new primary soybean provider for China. So he went around and spent instead of spending money to help the farmers, which of course he shouldn't have to spend the money. He should just not have done the trade tariffing that caused the problem in the first place. Like you collect all the all the tariffs, and then you spend all the tariffs bailing out farmers. That's what he did the first term, right? And then now we have a second term where he doesn't even bail out the farmers. He says, fuck you guys. I'm going to give all this money to your competitors abroad. A foreign nation is going to get all the soybean contracts with China because we like them. We don't give a shit about you. And then you can find online a lot of these farmers are like bewildered. They're stunned. Like, I voted for him because of X, Y, and Z. Why is he screwing us over? And it's because he never gave a shit about you. He lied to you, and you should have known that. We were saying this. We had evidence, before he was elected. We had tons of evidence that everything he was saying for farmers was a lie, and no one listened to us, and here we are.
And it's just the Trump logic of big bucks over small, I suppose, as John Stewart puts it. So I guess one of the other aspects of the Trump administration that we could talk about is the fact that DOGE didn't do anything to address the waste and corruption in the military-industrial complex, which would have been an easy way for DOGE to make some kind of headway with progressives.
Oh, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because I was hinting at that before with the reinvention programs under Al Gore, and so I studied that a lot in the 90s. I was very interested in that program. And all of the literature, the scientific literature about what the policies were and why they worked and how they worked and so on. And so we actually brought this down to a science, like to do efficiency. Like that was the original efficiency program. That was the original DOGE, was Al Gore's government reinvention program. And it actually worked because he did the kinds of things that you're talking about, where he went and found actual real inefficiencies and fixed them. And that's why eliminating red tape, doing monetary policy differently for different departments. And one of the examples of this is, like you just mentioned, which is the military contracts thing. So I think a lot of people don't know this. They should know this. I don't know why people don't all know this, but like you said, the military industrial complex, we'll just say corporations that sell contracts for weapon systems. Let's say it's a sonar system or a missile system or a tank or a fighter. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, whatever weapon system they sell, on the books, right? Well, first of all, of course, they promise it'll be delivered for X number of dollars, and then it ends up being like twice as much in the end, and so it really screws us over. And then there were the policy moves of saying, like, we're not going to allow that to happen anymore. No price overruns. And so anyway, so that was a whole other side issue. But what would happen is you would have the budget item for, let's say, tanks. We're going to buy a bunch of tanks. So it shows up in the budget as X number of dollars to build all these tanks. Okay, cool. We got the tanks. But the thing is that the contracts that we end up signing with the companies, like, basically ramrod us on parts. So you have like these ridiculously high rates for parts that are obvious graft. But of course, that doesn't show up in the principal budget. Once you've chosen to buy the tanks, you're committed to the long-term maintenance contracts and stuff like that. But so when you're stuck in these, this is where the whole legend of the $5,000 toilet seat comes from, right? Like that was an apocryphal story, but it's an example of the kind of thing that was going on. And I actually experienced this directly when I was in the Coast Guard, in the military, living at sea, working at sea. and in the sonar department, we had a keyboard on our passive sonar brake, and the keyboard is just a 10-digit standard like calculator keyboard. You even then that you could have bought at Radio Shack for people who remember what Radio Shack was. You could go down the street and buy it for $1, right? It was basically $1. Genuinely less than that, but easily you could get it for $1 and replace this thing. But we were required by our contract, so Congress basically signed a contract with the supplier that mandated that we could not do that, nor could we repair the keyboard ourselves. They were forbidden by contract. No, we had to swap the entire part out, even though it was just one key that was broken. We had to swap the entire part out, and we had to buy a replacement from them. There's no second party. There's nothing, no other option. We had to buy it from them, and so we're looking. Okay, well we went through all this and oh shit. Okay, I guess we got to get the part. Do we have it in in storage? And my supervisor looked into it and he says, look, if we pull that out of storage, it dings our budget by $1,200. So the card itself, the keyboard, the stupid fucking $1 Radio Shack keyboard, they were selling us for $1,200. I guarantee you that is wild graft. Like, it's just outrageously criminal. Because there's absolutely no way, I can guarantee you there's absolutely no way the keyboard costs $1,200. And if it did, they should never have agreed to buy this thing, because you could go get another thing that that reduces that by 1,000% or whatever. So anyway, the other one. So what we did is we sort of broke the law and fixed it anyway. But that's a whole other story. But what we found when we went to fix it is that the design of the keyboard was so poor that it looked to us like it was designed to fail. Like, it was designed so badly that it was not designed to be rugged. It was designed to fail.
Right.
So it was designed for us to be burning $1,200 at outrageous rates, constantly replacing these keyboards. That's what it looked like. And I swear, like, I looked at the part and the construction of it, and it was phenomenally bad design. And it was, it was either it was deliberate or this was massively incompetent design of a keyboard, just a simple keyboard, right? So that's what DOGE should have gone after, right? They should have been reviewing these contracts and say, look at how we're being reamed with irrationally overpriced parts for things, right? Like, that's what they should have gone digging for, is that kind of stuff. And that's exactly the wisdom. You look at the military, how much we spend on the military. It's like half our budget, right? I can't remember. Is it a third? Is it a half? I can't remember how much. It's like a lot. But when you look at what your biggest budget item is, that's where you go to look for efficiencies, because if you can increase the efficiency of that budget item by 10%, the raw dollar number is much huger. If you go and try to increase the efficiency of a penny-ante little department, and you increase its efficiency by 10%, you gain rounding error. It's like an insignificant amount. So what you should do is you should really have hit the military and gone in and looked at all those contracts. Look at where are we wasting money here, and just ruthlessly gone through and solved all of those hemorrhages there, because there's so much more money to save in the military budget without even changing anything. That's even before we decide to downsize the military, which you can make a whole argument for that as well. But even apart from that, there's so much money to save there just in doing what DOGE imagined in its brain would do, which it didn't do. It didn't do any of these kinds of actual efficiency pursuits. It didn't look for actual wasted dollars. It just looked for programs it didn't like and killed them. And they were just penny-ante programs, so the amount that they saved was trivial. And then without the programs, we ended up losing more money because you're not doing the things. I mean, the funny thing was, you take the example of killing USAID, right? Yeah, I get it. The Republicans fucking hate that program, so they made up an excuse to kill it, because who wants to feed starving children? Fuck them. That's the attitude, right? But the amount of money we were spending is trivial compared to the overall budget, so it was a trivial line item to kill. And look what happened. So, we pulled all that money. First of all, it probably killed tons of kids. Yeah, okay, that probably happened. But who moved in? Fucking China. Right, so as soon as we pulled money, that was the reason, that's what we were using USAID for, was for goodwill and to maintain control, basically, a certain measure of our toe in the door of other countries, so we can talk to them and negotiate things, because we had a negotiating position, because look, we're giving this money to help you out here, So you should give us something back in return. And then there's other things like intelligence. So like you're helping them out. So now, look, you should give us intel if there's any kind of like Russian or Chinese activity going on that we should know about. So anyways, this idea, it's a diplomatic expense. You're buying these people off. Just like we spend as much money on the militaries of Jordan and Egypt as we do on Israel. Notice the two border states on Israel, we give them the same amount of money as Israel. We do it for the same reason, right? Like we're getting something for that money. It's not wasted money. It's important stuff. And if we pull that money, well, someone else is going to go in and take the deal, right? So who's going to control, the African countries that we pull all the USAID money out of it? Well, it's going to be China, because China's going to move in, replace all that money, and now China owns them. And that's so massively against our national interests that it's just a stupid thing to do, because they don't understand what the sort of Machiavellian realpolitik was of USAID, right? Like that's the kind of like stupidity that they were engaging, rather than, for example, look at USAID and say, okay, are we wasting money there? Like, are we spending twice as much for the food than we needed to be? Like that would be an actual like efficiency goal, right? So look, where is the money being wasted in USAID? Not whether is USAID a waste of money, because it's not. Like it was actually a super cheap way to keep our toe in the door and influence, and it helps our intelligence agencies. It just helps everybody. There's so many goals that it achieves for very little money relative to our total budget. But they didn't care about any of that because they're idiots, right? Like this, let's get rid of it and we'll save, look at all the money we saved. But no, right? Like how much money now are we going to lose because we've lost access to all of those assets and benefits, right? So now we've got to buy that stuff back in other ways, or suffer consequences that will cost us money. So there's a lot of ways like that. And people can go and, again, don't have to believe us. They could research this and say, like, what programs were cut by DOGE and how much money did it end up costing us without those programs in place? And a good example is the damage they did to the IRS, right? We just figured out that there's practically a law of physics about how much money you spend on the IRS and how much income you gain back. Like it's a huge profit return. And so, but no, they killed the IRS. They did everything they could to kill the boost of the IRS to make it more efficient, and under the claim of making it more efficient. But no, they were actually making it less efficient. So we're actually losing more money from all of the money they pulled out of the IRS. The amount of money we're losing hugely overwhelms whatever the budget item is that they get. So like actually they're costing us money, not saving us money. And so that's kind of like irrational, like childish thinking about how the world works, that and that's where we are now. This is the post-truth era where the truth no longer matters. It's just feelings. It's like, I don't like the IRS, so let's kill it. And so, yeah, okay, why aren't we making where's all our money? What happened to all our money? And it's like, yeah, dumbass. So that's the kind of thing where DOGE was not ever doing any actual efficiency things, right? So like an efficiency thing would be looking for, can we get the same thing for half as much money? That would be like, are we spending money that we don't have to achieve the objective? Like those are efficiency goals, right? Not the shit that DOGE did.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, Elon gave Trump how many hundreds of billions of dollars just for this all to collapse and implode, with Elon implying that Trump's a pedophile and telling everyone he's mentioned in the Epstein files. So Elon's foray into oligarchy didn't start off very well.
No. So do you want to keep going, or?
Yeah, because actually I'm glad you brought up the question of China, because what I was wondering, what I wanted to pose here was, do you think China has global ambitions? Do you think China wants to be a global hegemon? Because that's kind of the fundamental question. Because if they do, if they don't just want regional hegemony, if they want to break out, so to speak, and control global GDP and be the most powerful military, then they're going to influence other countries to be like them and make them more totalitarian. And it seems to me that right there would be the argument for American leadership globally,
Yeah,
because then it'd be our mission to stop them and from influencing our own politics as well, because that's what autocratic countries do. That's what Russia does
yeah,
to us, for
yeah.
example. What do you think China's global ambitions are?
So it used to be, I would say, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30. Not exactly sure the timeline. It used to be that China didn't, right? Um, but ever since the Iraq War, that's changed, and I think largely because of squeeze on global fuel and food and supplies, so that China's realized that it's more dependent on imports than it ever used to be, and that requires it to control more of the world. It's the exact same reasoning that the United States does, right? Like that we depend on the minerals in Africa. We depend on, the rare earths in Africa, especially. We depend on all sorts of stuff that we pull out of Africa. We depend on stuff that we pull out of all these different places. We depend on oil, right? So we depend on all of this stuff. So we need to have control in some sense. This is the sort of like the standard mainstream realpolitik of foreign policy, is that we can't lose access to oil. We can't lose access to rare earths. We can't surrender that to the opponent. Now, for example, the war in the Congo in the 60s, the one that almost started World War III. This is one that people don't know about, but it was over rare earths, which was like a big deal even then, even though it's more a big deal now because of microelectronics, but and electric cars and things like that. But it was becoming a big deal because of electronics, the rise of electronics in the 60s. It was becoming a big deal. Congo had a lot of these minerals. Our opponent there was Russia, right? So it was a proxy war in the Congo. um, Basically there was like two main opponents, really three opponents fighting each other, but there was two general sides, which was the US backed people and the Russia backed people. And that's now switched largely, like Russia's ability to influence foreign countries has declined. Like they've sort of shrunk their influence abroad because their civilization is in decline. Like they can't afford
Right.
to do those things anymore. But
They've
now
been kicked out of
China,
Syria.
yes, right. Yeah, they do. They barely even, like, their ability to like control things in Syria was very limited, and largely because Syria was so fucked that it was cheaper for them to maintain a foothold there. Same with Iraq, but they're losing these footholds, right? They're not controlling Syria anymore, or at least not. They're trying. There's negotiations going on with the new government to try and keep their foothold there, but they can't afford it because they're spending so much money on the Ukraine war. That's a whole other like storyline. But now we see that China realizes that it needs to do the same things. That it needs to control mineral supplies. It needs to control oil supplies. It needs to control even coal and other things. So it's starting to do that, and so we see this physically happening. So, like in Iraq, when we went into Iraq, the whole Cheney bullshit reason was like the sort of covert reason, but in hindsight, you can find studies showing this was the actual reason, was that we would have American companies move in and control the oil. Well, that didn't happen because China outbid a lot of us, and so there's a Chinese footprint in Iraq controlling a lot of the oil there, or at least that's what happened then. I don't know if it's still the case. I haven't checked back on the history there, but now we're seeing them do the same thing in Africa. So China is showing up in Africa doing basically USAID type stuff, basically replacing us for the same reason, because they want influence there. And we're pulling out, so now we're creating these vacuums that China can move in. So that's actually happening. That's a real thing that's happening right now. And so yeah, the sort of game has changed in that regard. Now, China hasn't done anything like troop intervention yet. In, like, for example, in Africa, they haven't gone in to like solve anything with a military action, but they're building a military capable of doing that. That's on their list of goals. It's part of their agenda. So that's a real thing that's happening. Um, in answer to your question,
Yeah, well, and I mean, I guess international relations theories would have something to say about why China hasn't done those things yet. Um, Probably, namely, that they aren't a regional power yet. They still have to contend with the fact that there's the Republic of China and Taiwan. The U.S. has allies in South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, India. The U.S.
Yeah, and
excuse me, China
uh,
has to deal with unrest in Hong Kong, Tibet,
that's right. Yeah.
the Uyghurs. So there's a lot for them to deal with right now.
And a lot of that, though, is also internal rot. So, like, there's been an increase in stories coming out of China about how a lot of Chinese high-ranking officers are getting their heads chopped off or thrown into prisons because of all the graft and stuff. So there's a lot of like shoddy work. To give an example, like there was a ship collision that revealed to us that their ships are garbage, but we weren't supposed to know that. They're like trying to project this sort of superpower status with ships to try and outdo us with the amount of ships they can put in the sea. But their ships are garbage. They're under, like, they're cheating basically. They're skimping on the expense of building them. And that was one of the scandals. Another one of the scandals was when they found that like a ton of their missiles had water in them instead of fuel because the officers were selling the fuel. Like this is the kind of like level of like rot and corruption that has been destroying Russia for like 20 years. But they're on it now. You've noticed like China's like on it. Like they're saying, okay, we realize there's this rot. We got to solve this. So they're spending a lot of resources and time trying to like backfill all the shit that went wrong in terms of their corrupt economy and their corrupt military industrial complex. They're dealing with that. They can't project power until they've solved that problem, right? Because that's the same problem we're dealing with, and they're seeing this with Russia, right? That Russia can no longer project power. Its inability to conquer Ukraine at all, much less in years and years, demonstrates that Russia is super weak. Like it cannot project power. It's paper tiger, as they would say. Well, China realizes that it's kind of in the same situation. So if China ever is to do something like that, it needs to solve all of those internal institutional problems that completely fucked over Russia. And so they're focused on that internal fix right now. So that's what's happening right now. And then they're doing a lot of saber rattling in the ocean area. They're trying to claim more sea power control than international law allows, and so on. But those are all like just saber rattling. They're not putting boots on the ground. They're not like blowing people up. They're not doing anything yet. And that's because they know that they can't start anything right now. They're at least wise enough, unlike Putin, wise enough to know that they cannot do a Ukraine action. They're not there yet, but they want to, and so they're working on it. And it's just a matter of time, really.
Well, it definitely says something about them that they're working on making fake ships. Because I guess if they were to actually ever try to launch an invasion of the United States of America, all those ships would get blown out of the water by surface to air missiles.
Yeah,
so I'm guessing
China,
this is like for
right.
a Taiwan invasion.
So, I mean, yeah, that would be the sort of forward. Like that's what they want us to think, right? That would be the obvious target, right? To have a big navy. I think they have more in mind the idea of doing what we do. But you know how we use our carrier group? We move a carrier group wherever we want to have influence. So right now, our big carrier groups are in the Middle East because we're bombing Iran. When we needed to do Venezuela, we did a carrier group down there. So we just move the carrier groups wherever we want. If we want to do a military action in Rwanda, we'll try to get a carrier group over there. So this idea that we have this basically mobile military where we can have everything that we need, our airports, hospitals, all that stuff is portable, and then we can project actual boots on the ground, helicopters, air power, tank power, and so on. We can get all that in country and out again, and therefore project our power anywhere in the world. Like we actually could invade any country or island on the planet. We have the ability to do that. Now, that doesn't mean it'd be wise to do it. That's a whole other question. But we have the ability. China wants that ability. So that's why it's building carriers. It wants to build carrier groups so that it can do things like this, so that it actually could go to Africa and intervene militarily in Africa or Iraq or wherever. It can't do that yet, but it wants to. And so that's the kind of thing that it's building. It also wants us to think that it's positioning to invade Taiwan. I've been watching a lot of military and political analysts on this, and I think most of the people who have good insider knowledge, good expert knowledge of China and that theater, I think the sense is mostly that Taiwan is a ruse. They want everybody to think that they want to invade Taiwan, so they rattle sabers about it. But I strongly suspect their eye is more on Siberia. I think like they're just waiting for Russia to fall apart so that they can just take all the oil capacity of Siberia. And we already see this where China is actually just walking in, just silently claiming Russian land. So there's actually like some disputed territory in northern China that China just walked in and took, like quietly, like no one, you hardly hear about it on the news. They just went and took it, but Putin can't do anything about it. And so part of that, I think, was testing the waters. Like, does Putin do anything about it? And he didn't do anything about it. And they're creating dependency. So Putin depends on China in certain ways, so that he's in a kind of a pickle if China decides to move on Siberia. Like, Putin won't have the forces to fight that, and like he might just have to acquiesce and come to some sort of détente. Like, I think that's the true game that might be happening in China. Can't say this for sure because they're very good at pretending to attack somewhere and not. This is a long history of China doing this. This comes right out of Sun Tzu, where they like make you think their target is X, but really they're planning on Y. And so like when people see that China does this all the time, they're making so much noise about Taiwan that really looks fake, right? Like, why would they call attention to their desire? Like, why do that? Why drum up more money being spent on Taiwan's defense? Why drum up us putting more money in there? Why not just be quiet about it, right? Why pretend, oh, no, we're not going to take Taiwan, it's fine, and then build up and then do it, right? No. They're actually trying, I think they're doing this on purpose. And that's also, of course, the Cold War strategy, right? Get your enemies to spend a ton of money on military weapons and bankrupt them. That's, I think, also part of the strategy of China. And it is interesting to note that China, I can't remember, I should check this. I think China is selling U.S. bonds now. So let me check that, because that's a big marker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're dumping bonds like crazy. So it used to be that China was so dependent, they were interdependent with the American economy because they were relying so much on our interest payment. We were paying them massive interest payments on our national debt because they bought zillions and however many dollars. I don't remember how much it is. It's a lot. They have a lot of U.S. treasuries. But in the last few years, and it's been accelerating, like month by month, it's been accelerating. They're selling those bonds off, which tells us that they're no longer interested in being economically tied to the United States, and they don't think the U.S. has got long to last, right? They think, like, we're going to default on our treasuries, our civilization's going to collapse, whatever. They got to get out of those. So they got to get out of their bond position. And so they're slowly, this is part of their long-term strategy, they're slowly getting out of the U.S. bond position, which puts them in a position to be able to count on, that means that they're counting on our economy collapsing, right? We're going to have a depression, we're going to be fucked over. They know that's the case, and it's probably part of their design, right? Is like, get us spending so much money on that, that it helps sort of bankrupt us. And so, like, they tricked Trump into spending however many millions, trillions of dollars he wants to spend on the military. Like, he's the fool. Like, he's the USSR all over again, spending way too much money fighting a war that no one's actually fighting. And that was the whole idea of Reagan's overspend, right? The beginning of massive American budgets was based on this idea of outspending enemies to, like, tank them. Now China's doing it to us, and we're completely oblivious to that. Like, we're just so stupid that we don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, do you think the United States of America should intervene to defend Taiwan if China ever invades it, or are you saying that's maybe not actually what their main goal is in the first place?
I really doubt China will invade Taiwan. I've actually done a lot of research on this because I'm very interested in what's going on in Taiwan, like, just politically, like, what's the atmosphere like there, what's the government like there, what's the economy like, and I've been looking at, like, what is Taiwan's plan, because they have every reason to believe that China could invade, right? So they're spending serious dollars and serious attention to defending the island, and they have really good strategic plans for doing that. So I've looked into, like, Taiwan is an exceedingly difficult country to invade. it has a lot of like natural advantages that just make it a nightmare for any kind of landing or parachuting or anything like that. And so, anyways, I think Taiwan is ready. If China does invade Taiwan, yes, I absolutely do believe that creates a situation where we have to back our allies like Japan and Australia, for example, South Korea. So we really do need to get involved in that war. Like that would suck us into a war that we can't let go. It would be like letting Hitler take Czechoslovakia, like it's or letting Putin take Ukraine. We shouldn't be allowing that either. The only reason we don't have to be in Ukraine is that Putin's, Russia is so fucking weak that it can't take Ukraine. So we can just spend money instead of lives fighting that move. But I think like if Putin had been more effective, I do think at some point, like if people might have said, "Oh, let's give up Ukraine. Who cares about Ukraine?" But what happens when he invades Poland, right? And Poland is pretty damn sure he's going to invade Poland. They're spending a huge amount of money on building up defense, and they're rattling a lot of sabers, making a lot of noise. Oh, look, Putin's making moves on us. It's just a matter of time. And then a lot of the smaller countries like Lithuania and so on are making the same point. I was like, look, we're next, right? If Ukraine falls, he's just going to keep rebuilding. He said he wants to rebuild the old Russian Empire, which means Poland, Lithuania, etc. So, maybe we would just be fools and let him take Ukraine, but eventually he's going to invade Poland, and then what do we do? That's a NATO country. Yeah, we absolutely need to start going to war with Russia. Like that has to happen. And I feel like Taiwan's in the same boat. Like if China invades Taiwan, we can't let that line in the sand be crossed, because it's just a matter of time before China just starts taking over everything else out there. And also, like, if we just abandon the one democracy out there, what signal does that sell to every other democracy that we've effectively abandoned by doing that? So now no one believes that the U.S. will defend them, and so what are they going to do? They're all going to pivot to China. So yeah, that's how you lose global supremacy, is by basically letting the enemy capture entire countries, especially countries that we are 100% dependent on for national security. That's part of the CHIPS Act, is acknowledging that national security issue, is that we depend on Taiwan so much for computer chips that if we lose Taiwan, we are literally fucked. And a lot of people have pointed that out. It's like, this is really bad. And so the part of the CHIPS Act as a national defense initiative is that we need to move some of these plants here, so that if we do lose Taiwan, we have the capacity to keep building the chips to maintain our economy. And we're not there yet. It's really important to note that yeah, we're aware of it, although Trump's trying to kill the CHIPS Act and all of that stuff, which is so fucking stupid. But for national security, we're aware of the national security need of maintaining a native chip supply, in the event of a global war. But we were only just started reacting to that. We should have started long before, but we finally get onto that in Biden's term. And so we're only just now building that capacity. It'll still be years, probably 10 years, I would guess, at least, before we're at a safe capacity where we could let Taiwan go on the chips thing. But then we have all the other reasons to ally and defend Taiwan. So, but right now, if China were to invade Taiwan now, we literally would be screwed if we don't defend Taiwan. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So anyway, yeah, if you're just a purely Machiavellian about that we're so dependent on Taiwan, we would have to defend it.
Yeah. So I guess as the final question, do you think it's kind of built into China's Marxist-Leninist ideology to have these kinds of global aspirations? Because that would be my take. Because I would think if you're a smart Marxist-Leninist, then you realize that if there are other capitalist states, if there are capitalist states in existence, when you're a socialist state, you can't transition to communism because that's a stateless society, and you'll be vulnerable to invasion or interference from the capitalist states. So, and most of the socialists I talk to who go that route would say that China would have to dominate the globe before it could transition to a communist society. And that would be its motivation for having these global aspirations, so it can feel safe from capitalist interference when it transitions to communism.
Yeah, that makes. So I don't know enough about that, so I can't comment on that as an expert. I haven't researched it, so I don't know. It sounds like you have the pulse of people who have, and they would be the ones to ask that question. But just from you describing that particular reality, we don't even need like the sort of ideological argument. You would have just the sort of straightforward Machiavellian argument, which is that it's very clear that China does want to be its own boss, right? It doesn't want to be under the thumb of somebody else. And you're right, is that once you allow a free, open economy, global free trade creates mutual dependencies so that you can't be the boss. Like, this is one of the problems with like losing the hegemony for the United States, is that we learned this with the tariffs the last year, is that we're so dependent on so many other countries because it's a free trade democratic market that like walling off imports through tariffs wreaked havoc on our economy to the point that like we probably wouldn't have made it another couple of years. Like it's like that much damaging, and it's benefiting everybody else for us to be going downhill. And this ties into another point which relates to all of this, which is the new development of the yuan becoming a reserve currency. So one of China's big global policies is to work with the whole the BRICS, which is what is that? Brazil, Russia, China, India, is to create an alternative reserve currency so that it used to be, and I mean when I say used to be, I'm talking like 5 years ago. It used to be that if you wanted to buy anything across borders in the planet, you usually had to go through U.S. currency to do it. Like basically all of the banking system is based on the US dollar. So you had to like basically do your trades through dollar conversion and back or whatever for any kind of like big international money movement. What China has been doing lately, and people can look this up, is that they've been building an alternative banking system that uses the yuan and a few other currencies, but they're really pushing the yuan, which is the Chinese, their equivalent of the dollar, so that it is possible for countries to completely avoid the US dollar altogether. And this is an international global thing. So these are countries that are trading, even if they're trading with countries, neither country in the trade is China. They can trade through the yuan, through the Chinese currency as the reserve currency in the middle, right? Just like the US dollar used to be. And this is growing and growing and growing. So the US dollar is declining as U.S. reserve currency, and the Chinese currency is increasing as the reserve currency. This is a global effect. And so you have to ask, like, why does China want to do this? This plays into what you were just saying. That's why it makes sense to me, is that they want to be independent of the U.S. ability to manipulate its own dollar. They want to be free of manipulation or influence or the thumb of the United States. And if they create a global trading system that's based on their currency, well, they're the thumb right now, right? So they're the ones who control everything. So that shows that ambition is genuinely there, and they're actively working to build it. This is another example where Trump is playing right into this by like deflating the American currency because of his stupid, weird economic policies, because he has lunatics and cranks telling him how to run an economy, and so he's devaluing the dollar, which is playing right into China's hand. Because if we devalue the dollar, it becomes less attractive as a reserve currency, and the Chinese yuan becomes attractive as a reserve currency, so people will shift. And once they shift, they don't go back. There's no reason to go back, right? So once you've lost those customers, they're often gone for good, right? Unless something really changes again. This is a problem with trade in general. The tariffs create this whole problem that any products, if you make it more expensive for them, they'll just stop buying your stuff, and then they'll just buy it somewhere else. And once they've switched, they don't really have an incentive to go back. We're seeing this with the bourbon industry in trade with Canada, where Canada is just ditching American bourbon, and it's basically bankrupting American bourbon companies. But once people like get used to just buying other bourbons, why would they ever want to go back to American bourbon? There's no reason, right? Like Jack Daniel's is not that great a quality drink. You could easily replace it with something else, because it's not like some sort of, you can only get the great flavor from. No, that's not. They don't have that. They had it because it was cheap. Now it's not, and so now no one wants to buy that anymore because they can buy other things. They're just as good or better for a lower price. And so, and once they brand shift, they don't have to go back, right? There's no reason for them to go back to ever buying American bourbon again. Even when we go back to free trade, there won't be an incentive. So that's happening with reserve currency, which is a huge, big global economic problem. that Trump is just blowing right through and really just pissing in the wind on. But it ties into what you're talking about with China's global ambitions and its ability to be out from under anybody's thumb. And that comes to the idea of supplies. Like, why do they want oil access, coal access? Why do they want rare earths access? Because they don't want to be dependent on anyone else for those things. And now they are dependent on those things. So they have to do what we did, which is become a global superpower.
Yeah. And one thing of note is that China is actually trying to become increasingly less dependent on American exports or
That's right.
imports. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but they want to just make all their own stuff and not
That's right.
not
No,
rely
no, that's
on sending anything off to America now.
yeah, that's why one of the biggest mistakes Trump ever did was try to start a trade war with China because it played right into their game. Like, oh, this is great. You gave us a perfect excuse to shift all our supply chains elsewhere. So it's like soybeans. We don't need your soybeans. We can get them from Argentina, right? And you're talking about manufacturing. Yeah, their idea is to try and manufacture everything that they can locally, internally, so they don't have to buy our stuff. So yeah, they loved the trade war. The trade war was great for them because it gave this opportunity to actually divert investment towards building up their own local economy and not being less and less dependent on American imports.
Okay, so a quick kind of fun question to wrap up with. We're each gonna grade the Trump administration. I'm just gonna give it. I'm just gonna give it an F. What are you gonna give it?
Yeah, solid F. It is objectively the worst administration in American history. I can't think of any president who's done worse on every metric that you would ever measure a presidential success by. And I'm even including the guy that oversaw the collapse of the economy and the Great Depression. So like, yeah, I can't even think, and I'm even thinking like the most evil ones like Jackson and Indian genocide and all that. Like he's worse than all of those other. It's really the worst administration and the most criminally corrupt administration in the entire history of the country.
Yeah, and I think he knows things are heading towards him being held more accountable, which is why he's coming out with all this ridiculous stuff. It's interesting because he said there was voter fraud all the way back in 2016. Yeah. And then he had that commission once he got elected that was supposed to find all the voter fraud. Yeah. And all the people on that commission were like, we don't even know what we're supposed to be doing. And then it just got disbanded and nothing ever happened. Yeah. And that's about the same kind of credibility I take all this stuff he's coming up with now with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's so consistently lying and making shit up to the point that literally, like, I would say 90% of the words out of his mouth are bullshit, which is why I don't listen to anything he says anymore. And also his top cabinet members are the same. Like if you look at, Bondi's hearing before Congress, like how completely vacuous and devoid of any relevant information that was. Like everything she said was useless data. It was just lies and bullshit, just constant. So there's not even any reason to listen to anything she says. You just have to go look at what they're actually doing, like what's actually happening. Or if you're lucky to get access to something that they didn't think that you would see, which is happening in a lot of court cases where we're seeing sort of internal communications and we're seeing like the reality of what's going on. So that's happening a lot. So that's the point where I just don't even trust anything they say anymore. And it's just to the point that it's not even worth the bother of even hearing what they say. Because normally, like when you have a liar, like the lies they tell often at least inform you as to what their intentions are. But now we don't even have that. There's no connection between the bullshit that they spin and what they actually want to do or what they're actually going to do, or even what they actually did. So it's just completely useless information. And I think that's kind of like the peak of the post-truth era is that we're at a point now where the American government is disseminating zero useful information and it's all lies and bullshit.
Yeah, well, there's of course that famous video that went around and I think it's Trump in an airplane and he's dropping feces all over the American people. And that's actually a good representation of what he's done to public discourse.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Richard Carrier, thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. It was really great to have this discussion with you.
Yeah, it's good. I savor the opportunity to talk about politics. I often don't get asked about it, so I just wish more people were aware of this stuff. So it's not just me or you or whatever. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Carrier. Bye.